You're watching BATV, bringing Brookline home.
Hello, I'm Karma Kitai, and I'm your host for Alivelihood, New Adventures as We Age. And today I'm going to introduce you to Peg Doyle. And Peg has had an interesting series of careers in her life. And at present, she is, we're going to call her a holistic nutritionist or holistic health coach. And we'll hear how she got there in a bit of a circuitous path, huh?
Yes, it has been, Karma.
So welcome
Thank
to
you.
Alivelihood, Peg.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I met you, I guess maybe it was last year when you were on a panel at the Life Planning Network.
Yes.
Which is kind of a pretty vibrant organization of people who provide all kinds of services to people over age 50, right?
Yes.
And you were
that's
talking
right.
about nutrition.
Yes, it was a great day. We talked. There were 3 of us on the panel and talked about the benefits of exercise, the importance of nutrition, and also mindfulness. So it was a great time. I really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, well, and I remember having learned quite a bit from you that day.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's kind of a passion of mine, so I'm always happy to have an audience to chat with about that topic.
Yeah. So Peg, you say it's a passion of yours, but I know that you did other things in your life before you came here to nutrition, and you were in the IT world for a long time, right?
Yes, I was in that field for 15 years, and that was a period of real growth for me in the sense of my prior career was fairly insular. I was in a very supportive environment of women nurturing children and nurturing one another.
Early child development field, right?
Yes. And so when I switched careers and started out in information technology, there were huge changes going on. I started right at the time of divestiture, which was a period where the government broke up the telephone companies. And so suddenly all corporations needed in-house support and expertise for managing their phone systems, where prior to that, everybody was supported by their local telephone company. And so it was a time of enormous growth in the field, and when I started, it was almost exclusively a man's field. So I earned my pay in that environment after being in a very nurturing environment prior to that.
So how did you get into the IT field, though? That wasn't your training, was it?
It wasn't, and I was looking for something in a different field, actually partly because I had gone through a divorce and really needed to earn a living, where prior to that I was working part-time in child development, and so income was important to me. I had a master's degree already, but the time that I was looking for a teaching job was right at the time we had a dip in population, so it was very difficult to get hired with a master's degree. So I thought I should really start looking at other fields and what might interest me. My brother was a researcher for Bell Labs, so he encouraged me to get into the field because it was really developing quite rapidly. So I went looking, and I was hired by the first company because I had had experience supervising people, and the hiring manager felt that I would learn the technology as I went along.
So did you?
Well, I combined it with on-the-job learning, as well as getting a certificate in telecom management at Northeastern, so I'd have some of the theoretical material behind what I was learning on site.
So you said, though, that it's been a passion of yours to think about and work around nutrition and health.
Yes.
But back then, were you interested in that?
You know, I always was, Karma, and in fact, way back when I was getting out of high school, I had thought about doing something related to health more in the dental area than the medical area. But my mom coaxed me into education. She was looking toward the future.
The education days for us, huh?
Yes. And so I thought it probably makes sense. I loved children, loved being around them, and so I went into that field. But whenever I picked up a Time magazine or a Newsweek, I always went to the medical area for the first articles of interest. So it had been an interest of mine for a long time.
So you were in IT for quite a long time.
Yes.
And then how did things evolve to get you where you are today?
Well, a few things happened. I was feeling very stressed by my job, and felt like I had really reached a point in my life where I could be more selective of how I wanted to spend the next phase of my working life. And so I started looking into things related to wellness. I also was approaching 50 and started to see some issues in my own health where I thought, I really need to pay more attention. And so I first enrolled in the Boston Shiatsu School, which was a school in Cambridge.
So that's a kind of massage therapy?
It's acupressure therapy, so it's different from massage, and it's connected with traditional Chinese medicine. So
it uses the points.
Yes,
that
it uses the points.
acupuncture would use.
Yep. And so I guess, really, as I say that, I got involved in medicine from the Eastern perspective more than the Western. And that's where I really developed my holistic approach to health and well-being.
And did you use shiatsu?
Yes, and I still do.
You still do?
I still practice shiatsu and also Reiki, which is an energy medicine for pain and anxiety, so I use that as well. So sometimes with my nutrition clients, I incorporate the body work. Not always, but it is an option for people.
And both of those are hands-on
They are.
kind of body work, huh?
They are.
Well, so let's talk more about your current career. And why don't you talk about just how you define it, the kinds of people you serve?
Well, I mentioned my own health challenges as I was turning 50, and what what has really evolved for me, when I was in nutrition school, the director always encouraged us to get away from thinking we can save the whole world, because we want to do that, and instead think about who do you most connect with or relate to. And when I thought about that,
try to define a niche, you mean,
yes.
huh?
And when I thought about that, I realized that it's women at midlife who I really connect with, because most women at that point are beyond counting calories and doing rapid weight loss programs, and are really more focused on their health. Some have had health scares, and others have just realized that chronic dieting brings no pleasure and a lot of pain, and doesn't get the results they want anyway. So, so that's really the area that I have a lot of interest in. Women who really want to be healthy and are either unsure of what healthy eating is, or just don't know how to put it all together in terms of their busy lives and the other things that get in the way of their eating well.
So how do you explain to people what healthy, normal eating is?
Well, for anybody I see, I start out with a complimentary health consultation to really get a sense of whether they're ready to do this kind of work. And then through that,
whether they're ready mentally to make some changes.
And through that conversation, and it's very informal, but also very detailed, it's much like the conversation we're having today, in that we explore some of the lifestyle issues that a person is experiencing and what their goals are.
So lifestyle issues like what?
Working 60 hours a week, or never being home for dinner, being a big restaurant eater, elevated cholesterol, breast cancer, whatever things have come up in their lives that have...
Or young children at home and working full-time. Right?
It can be that too.
But I suppose for the population that you serve, the children are not so young anymore.
Not too young, but there are a few with younger ones. But it's really to get a picture of what their life is, not just for me, but for them, so that they can begin to figure out why it's been a struggle, and what possible things may come from having a health coach. And I structure it over a 6-month period because the research has shown it usually takes that long to make lasting changes. And the last thing I want is for somebody to just get a taste of it and then not have the support to really make it last for them. So we do a lot of different things depending on what each person's needs are. For some, it's weight loss, and so we focus a lot on whatever their issues are around weight, whether it's night eating or portions or wrong food choices. But it's never about deprivation or guilt. We do that enough to ourselves without anybody coming along and telling people that they can't have something. What I've experienced in my work is that when good quality foods are introduced, they crowd out the foods that have been causing the weight gain or causing the acid reflux or the migraine headaches or whatever the particular problems are that people have been having.
So that's interesting to me, but can you say more about what you mean when you say they crowd out the problem foods?
Sure. An example is a woman I worked with who had a craving for sweets, and she, in one of our first sessions, said, I just can't ever imagine walking by that big jar of Hershey's Kisses on my secretary's desk without helping myself. They just are too wonderful. And I said to her, just hang in and we'll see what happens. And so what happened was, in introducing some of the foods that provide a sense of sweetness, a sense of relaxation and calmness, the appeal for the Hershey's Kisses really diminished. And further on into our work together, I think it was probably the 5th month, she confessed to me that she was sure I was lying when I told her that. But she said, I really don't even want those things anymore. I walk right by without any sense of needing willpower, because I know now that I'm getting what I need from what I'm eating.
So what do you think about the addictive quality of sweets like that? What's your take on that?
Oh, I think they're definitely addictive.
In a physiological way.
Yes. Refined sugar is a very addictive food. And a story I heard in nutrition school was related by Neil Barnard, who's a cardiologist and chair of Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And he told a story of how he took a little baby that was about 8 or 9 months old who had only been breastfed, and with his mother's permission, placed him in a room. And Dr. Barnard went into the room. The mother was not present, but she was watching on a monitor. He went into the room with a little bit of sugar on his pinky, put it in the baby's mouth, and the baby's face just lit up. And Dr. Barnard left the room, returned a moment later with the mother, and guess who the baby had eyes for?
Oh,
so I thought that was a very vivid example of
scary,
just how
isn't it,
addictive sugar is.
even that first taste?
Yes, even that first taste. But I don't feel that we need to never have sugar. It's a pleasurable experience.
You mean refined sugar?
It's a pleasurable experience. When it becomes damaging is when we have it all the time, and we often don't realize that we're having it all the time if we're eating packaged foods or restaurant food or prepared foods from the grocery store.
Right.
It's in all
so
of
much
those
sugar
foods.
in,
So it's not so much coming out of the sugar bowl. It's from those kinds of foods that we get acclimated to having sugar as part of our diet on a regular basis.
Now, do you believe that certain people are more prone to get a sugar addiction?
It seems so, Karma. Yes, I have noticed that some people are clearly addicted to it, where others can eat moderate amounts
Take
of
it or leave it, maybe?
and not have a craving.
Right. Huh. I don't know if I told you, but I have, over the years, have had a number of specialties in my practice as a life coach and also as a psychotherapist. But one of them, years ago, was working with people with eating disorders. Maybe I mentioned it.
Yes, you did.
And so I'm remembering, as you're talking, that one of the first training programs I was in was called the FACE program, an acronym for, I can't even remember what the acronym was now, but it was FACE, and I don't think it's still around, but I learned much of what you're talking about, and it was a long time ago, and people were not thinking about, normal eating and healthy eating in the same way at all as the FACE program was teaching. There was the food pyramid that we looked at, and lots of diet, responses. And of course, when people are on diets, they tend to yo-yo. Their weight goes up and down, up and down. Yeah. But just from my personal experience with sugar, I'm kind of curious about it because, as you're bringing it up here, I grew up with a grandmother from Vienna, and she baked every day these luscious things, from by hand. What do you call it? By hand?
Yes.
From scratch. That's what I
Yes.
mean. From scratch. And we all, every day when I came home from school, there was something in the cookie jar.
Sure.
My favorite were these vanilla Kupfeln or something. They were just almond, I think, crushed almonds. There was no flour in it. Crushed almonds and rolled in powdered sugar or something. They were really delicious. So I ate that all the time as a kid.
Yes.
And I was a skinny kid. And then for years and years, once I got to my 20s, I wasn't interested in sugar at all, and I never had desserts. So that's why I was curious about your thinking about, are some people more prone to it? Sort of like alcohol. Some people can drink moderately and they don't become alcoholics.
Yes.
But for some people, I think of it as almost like an allergic reaction.
I totally agree with you, and that's a really interesting example of how you can. Some people can grow up on sugar and take it or leave it as adults. You were eating it, it sounds like, simply because it was there and it tasted good, where someone else might never be able to leave that pleasure
cookie jar,
zone. And you mentioned alcoholics. You'll often see in a recovery program that there are lots of donuts and cookies and sweets around because alcohol is the ultimate sugar. So that it's a step away from alcohol, and I think in some ways it probably eases the recovery or helps to transition from the alcohol to something better.
Right. Yeah. So I know you've mentioned nutrition school, but I think you went through an interesting training program that was quite holistic, right?
Yes. When I decided to formalize my nutrition training, I realized I did not have an interest in becoming a dietitian, and mainly because, while I feel it has value from a research perspective, it didn't connect me with people on a holistic lifestyle basis. So I looked around and found a school in New York, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and that really appealed to me. And at the time I attended, it was an in-person program on weekends, and it's become so successful that they have transitioned into an online program so that people from all over the world can participate. And they brought in some of the top-of-the-line researchers on food and nutrition and disease from Yale, from Harvard, from University of Arizona, Andrew Weil, who you may be familiar with. And what really came out of it was this sense that everybody had their nutrition theories based on their research, but they were all a little bit different. So what I took away from that is there is no one perfect way to eat, and it just takes time and attention to figure out what the best way is for any one of us to eat that really gives us our energy, our vitality, our good numbers when we're having medical checkups, and a balanced weight. And it's different for each one of us, just as you said with the sugar experience.
Yeah. And of course, in terms of a holistic approach, we think about exercise as well, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And I know that you told me in your 30s and 40s you joined an adult soccer league, right?
I did, yes. I did.
And you were playing soccer for quite a while,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And having grown up in the 60s before Title IX, I did not have an opportunity to play a group sport, a team sport. And so it was thrilling and frightening for me all at once to join a team. And some of the girls were quite a bit younger and had been playing sports all their lives, even co-ed sports. So it was an experience, really, to learn how to bump into somebody and not reflectively say, "Excuse me." So it was a real learning experience, and one I thoroughly enjoyed.
Right. And I think you said you took some of that learning experience with you into the IT world, right?
I did. I felt in many ways that helped
You
me
could bump
understand
into
the way men operate in the workplace.
Being on a team, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. And then these days, though, you do more running and bicycling, you say,
I
right?
do. I belong to a running club and participate in a few races every year. And in the warm weather, I bicycle at least once a week, always on the bike trails, so I don't have to pay attention to traffic. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah. You know, before we stopped today, I'm remembering something you said to me when we talked before. I don't know if I can quote it exactly, but it was about obesity being related to malnutrition. And I was really struck by that. But I think it relates to what you were saying a little while ago about, you know, once you're exposed to nourishing foods, it crowds out the non-nourishing foods, right?
It's so true, Karma. We think of malnutrition as people being terribly underfed, but it also applies to anyone who's eating excessive amounts of nutrient-deficient foods, the highly processed foods, the fast foods. There really aren't any nutrients in those foods.
And sodas.
Sodas, sure. And our brain knows that and will keep calling for nutrients until we finally get them.
Yeah, but we probably misperceive that call, or at least people who eat that way.
Yes, yes.
Misperceive the call and think, oh, I need more chocolate.
Yes, yes.
Or I need more soda or something, right?
So I have a lot of compassion for people who are in that situation because it is not a lack of discipline. It's a real drive that needs to be shifted into something healthier with a lot of support because they're subjected to their own harsh judgments of their lack of discipline as they might see it, and also our culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's hard for them.
So even though our culture is so geared toward having so much junk in the stores and even in cafeteria lines in schools, right?
Yes.
Then there's another part of our culture that says you're supposed to be svelte.
Yes, and everyone
how do you
should be
be
the
both?
same size. Yes, if you're not a size 6 or 8, there's something wrong with you, and nothing could be further than the truth. And I think some of the performers, the public people, can be great examples of what happens when you are harshly judging yourself or have an expectation that you need to be a certain size to be successful. We just have to listen to the right role models for that.
Yeah, and of course Oprah, who was such a role model in so many ways for so many people.
Yes.
But she, of course, has had her struggles with weight.
Yes, and sometimes I think when there's a public figure like that with struggles over weight, it can just be exacerbated by the constant attention to it instead of all the other wonderful aspects of her life. So that I've often said if women at the age of 80 could have back all the energy, mental energy that they put into weight loss for something else to do with their lives, it would be a much happier world.
Well, that's a good note to end on then.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. And I'm very interested in nutrition, as you can see. And
Yes.
I'm glad to talk with you
And you know
about
a
it.
lot about it, Karma. So thank you.
Okay. And join us next time. It probably won't be till the fall, though, when we have a new show on A Livelihood, New Adventures as We Age.